Welcome to the Explainer. Today, we're taking an incredibly warm, validating first step into the actual mechanics of complex PTSD. Think of our time together today as a supportive session really grounded in Pete Walker's deeply insightful book, Complex PTSD: From Surviving to Thriving. If you've ever felt like you were just dragging around this invisible weight all the time, or if you've struggled to figure out why certain emotional storms just seem to hit you entirely out of nowhere, you're in the right place. We're going to unpack this together and walk through some truly life-changing concepts. Listen to this profound realization from one of Walker's readers. I found myself in your words. I don't feel defective or crazy or even unlovable. I'm sharing this right out of the gate to validate your lived experience. So many survivors carry this crushing burden of shame, genuinely believing that something is fundamentally broken inside of them. But as we're going to see today, that feeling, it's just a symptom. It is not the truth. Okay, let's establish exactly what we're dealing with here. Complex PTSD, or CPTSD, is a learned disorder. It's caused entirely by nurture, specifically a massive environmental failure like ongoing emotional abuse or severe neglect when you were a kid. It is absolutely not caused by nature. It's not some innate genetic defect, and it is definitely not a character flaw inscribed in your DNA. And here's the best news. Because it's a learned response to a traumatizing environment, it can be unlearned. For anyone completely new to this recovery journey, the first really crucial steps are going to be understanding your specific trauma, learning to identify your emotional flashbacks, shrinking that loud inner critic, and eventually learning how to properly grieve. So here's our agenda for today. 1. Demystifying CPTSD. 2. Inside emotional flashbacks. 3. The weight of toxic shame. 4. The 4 trauma responses. And 5. The map to recovery. Section 1. Demystifying CPTSD. Nurture, not nature. When most of us think of traditional PTSD, we instantly picture visual flashbacks to one singular, really specific traumatic event. But CPTSD is a whole different ballgame. It's actually characterized by prolonged emotional flashbacks, which usually don't even have a visual component. Instead, the trauma is invisibly re-experienced. It's like these intense, overwhelming feelings from the past suddenly flood your present moment. And that invisible re-experiencing? That brings us right to the core symptoms. Emotional flashbacks, toxic shame, self-abandonment, a vicious inner critic, social anxiety, and fragile self-esteem. I always tell my clients, if these resonate with you, it's absolutely vital to recognize that they are completely natural adaptations to an abnormal, dangerous childhood environment. You quite literally had to develop these responses just to survive. Unfortunately, because CPTSD is so incredibly complex, it gets misdiagnosed all the time. Survivors are unfairly labeled with panic disorder, ADHD, bipolar, borderline personality disorder, or OCD. Now, sure, some symptoms might overlap, but just slapping these labels on a survivor completely misses the root cause, the ongoing childhood trauma and emotional neglect. Trying to treat just the panic or just the attention deficit, well, it's basically like trying to blow away the smoke while ignoring the raging fire underneath. Section 2. Inside emotional flashbacks, the invisible storm. So, what exactly is an emotional flashback? It's a sudden and often heavily prolonged regression right back to the overwhelming feeling states of being an abused or abandoned kid. When you're triggered, your sympathetic nervous system just locks into the on position. You experience this intense hyperarousal, bringing a massive sense of fear, alienation, or even rage. These flashbacks can be subtle anxieties, or they can be absolutely paralyzing regressions that last for weeks. To manage these, Walker actually outlines a brilliant 13-step process. But if you're looking for the most vital, immediate steps to practice, actively say to yourself, out loud, I am having a flashback. Remind yourself that you are safe in the present moment, and firmly resist the urge to isolate yourself. Pete Walker describes his first identifiable emotional flashback like this, and it's so powerful. It felt like a fierce, hot wind. I felt like I was being blown away, disoriented, unable to speak, respond, or even think. This just vividly captures the sheer terror, that crushing feeling of smallness, and the absolute helplessness involved. During a flashback, your body essentially transports you back to the emotional landscape of your childhood. Section 3. The weight of toxic shame, the abandonment melange. Toxic shame is basically the ugly veneer wrapped around an emotional flashback. It totally obliterates your self-esteem. When you are stranded in a flashback, toxic shame is the voice making you feel loathsome, ugly, stupid, or just fatally flawed. Instead of letting you recognize that you are failed by your caretakers, it twists the narrative, convincing you that you're fundamentally worthless. Here's a really simple tip I offer clients to shrink that inner critic.
Start noticing when your inner dialogue uses extreme words like always or never. That absolute thinking, that is the toxic shame speaking, not reality.
So I want to pause and ask you a question I pose to my clients all the time. What is your primary trauma response? When that feeling of danger or toxic shame suddenly kicks in, how do you react? Do you get angry? Do you run away? Do you completely space out? Or do you immediately try to please everyone around you? Keep that in the back of your mind as we look at how kids adapt to these dangerous environments.
Section 4. The 4 Trauma Responses, Surviving the Unbearable.
When a child is abused or neglected, our hardwired human instinct of fight or flight actually morphs into an entrenched defensive structure. They overgravitate to one of 4 responses to survive. Let's do a quick self-assessment here. If your defense is narcissistic, meaning you respond aggressively to a threat, you default to fight. If you flee a threat by launching into hyperproductivity, perfectionism, or workaholism, your defense is the obsessive-compulsive flight mode. If you numb out, collapse, or just retreat into daydreaming, that's the dissociative freeze response. And finally, if you find yourself constantly trying to appease others at your own expense, you're exhibiting the codependent fawn response. Now, here's a really tragic piece of the puzzle. In many toxic families, siblings will actually adopt completely different 4F trauma roles. Why? Because abusive parents frequently use a divide and conquer principle, creating this intense pathological sibling rivalry. By modeling sarcasm and fault-finding, the parents essentially ensure the kids are totally isolated in their own trauma responses. You might have one sibling fleeing into work, while another is freezing in their bedroom. Ultimately, they're left completely unable to comfort or ally with one another. Section 5, the map to recovery, from surviving to thriving. All right, let's talk about the map out of here. Healing begins with recognizing exactly what was stunted in you. Things like self-acceptance, willpower, and your peace of mind. In a healthy family, a child's ego naturally develops these traits. But trauma forces those healthy instincts to go dormant. So recovery requires creating a practical, daily routine of what we call self-parenting. This means consciously and actively nurturing those arrested parts of yourself back to life every single day with the exact same patience and warmth a healthy parent would show a toddler. To actually do that, we start with cognitive healing, literally rewiring your brain to make it a supportive place to live. Step 1 is psychoeducation, getting really clear on exactly how the appalling parenting you received created your trauma, so you finally stop blaming yourself. Step 2 is shrinking that toxic inner critic. A super practical tip for this is thought stopping. Literally visualize a giant bright red stop sign, or say the word no out loud when you catch yourself spiraling into self-blame. And step 3 is developing mindfulness.
Now, mindfulness isn't just a buzzword here. It's a perspective that weds your capacity for self-observation with your natural instinct for self-compassion. Think of it as a benign curiosity about your own inner experience. This is absolutely your ultimate daily tool. When you practice mindfulness, you can finally pause, observe those abusive mental refrains you picked up in childhood, and actively reject them, swapping them out for thoughts that actually champion you.
But listen, cognitive work alone just isn't enough. We need emotional healing too. This means recovering your true emotional nature by fully accepting the so-called negative feelings, like anger and sadness. Repressing uncomfortable feelings just leaves us emotionally deadened. True emotional intelligence means welcoming the whole spectrum of your feelings. A great somatic self-help exercise for this is to just sit quietly and do a body scan. Notice exactly where anger or sadness physically tightens up your chest or your jaw. Then consciously breathe deep into those specific muscles, actively giving the trauma permission to just release from your body.
And that emotional release, that takes the active form of grieving. It is absolutely essential. It involves angering, which diminishes your fear and shame by recognizing how deeply unfair your abuse was. It involves crying, which awakens profound self-compassion. It includes verbally ventilating your pain to a safe person, which helps heal that deep abandonment. And finally, passively feeling your emotions so you can fully metabolize them. This grieving process is the exact mechanism that creates the true progression of recovery. It's what moves you from merely surviving your past to vibrantly thriving in your present. I absolutely love this thought from Pete Walker, which captures the essence of this whole journey. He writes, "Fire is the sun unwinding itself out of the wood. Similarly, effective recovery is unwinding the natural potential you were born with." I want you to really hear that. Healing is not about fixing some genetic defect. It is simply about liberating the vibrant, whole person you were always meant to be before the trauma forced you into hiding.
So, as we wrap up this explainer, I want to leave you with one final, provocative thought for your journey. As you begin to actively shrink your inner critic, and as you do the brave work of grieving your past, what parts of your true self will you finally allow to blossom? I highly encourage you to start envisioning a life that's driven by self-compassion. Because moving from surviving to thriving, it's not just possible, it is exactly what you deserve. Thank you so much for joining me today, and I really hope this helps you navigate the beautiful, unfolding journey of your recovery.